I returned from Singapore after 10 years apart, dreaming of surprising my daughter Hannah and meeting my 4-year-old granddaughter Grace in the beautiful Denver home I bought them. But as I quietly turned my key in the front door, I heard my son-in-law's voice cut through the silence. "Clean that mess up faster, or you'll get another beating tonight." I froze. Through the doorway, I saw Hannah on her hands and knees, picking up shattered dishes with trembling fingers, wearing a dirty apron that read, "Hamilton Family Property." They dared to treat my daughter like this, I would make them pay. My name is Jacob Bennett, and this is the story of how I stood up to protect my little girl. Before I share this powerful story about family and justice, comment below with your location and current time. I'm curious to know if you're listening during your morning coffee or winding down for the night. 10 years of working in Singapore's tech industry had been worth every sleepless night. I'd built data centers under that relentless tropical sun, saved every dollar, all for this moment. Coming home to surprise Hannah and finally meet Grace face to face. The Denver streets looked exactly as I remembered as my taxi pulled up to the house on Cherry Creek Drive. Same red brick facade, same white picket fence, same oak tree where Hannah used to climb. This was the house I'd bought for her before leaving for Singapore, my gift to ensure she'd always have a safe place to call home. I stood on the sidewalk, hands trembling as I pulled out my key. Hannah had no idea I was coming. This was going to be the surprise of a lifetime. The front door opened silently. I stepped inside, grinning as I prepared to call out, "Surprise!" But the word died in my throat when I heard a man's voice from the living room. "Clean that mess up faster, or you'll get another beating tonight." My blood turned to ice. Through the hallway, I saw Hannah on her hands and knees, scrubbing vomit from the hardwood floors. She wore a dirty apron with words that made my stomach lurch. "Hamilton Family Property." My daughter labeled like she belonged to them. Suddenly, Huxley's demeanor shifted completely. His face transformed from cruel anger to a bright smile as he strode toward me with arms outstretched. "Dad, welcome home," he exclaimed with false warmth. "What a wonderful surprise. Hannah was just helping with some housework. You know how she is, always wanting to pitch in." Hannah scrambled up quickly, untying the degrading apron and shoving it behind a couch cushion. Her movements were frantic, desperate. "Dad," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired." A small figure peeked out from behind Hannah's legs, Grace seeing me in person for the first time. Her big brown eyes studied me with curiosity and fear. "Mommy," Grace whispered, "who is that man?" The words hit like a punch. Despite our video calls, I was still a stranger to her. I crouched to her level voice, gentle despite the turmoil inside me. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm your Grandpa Jacob. Remember me from our video calls? I've been working far away, but now I'm here to visit you and Mommy." Grace buried her face against Hannah's leg, overwhelmed. Hannah placed a protective hand on her daughter's head, and that's when I saw it, a dark purple bruise wrapping around Hannah's forearm. "Hannah," I started, but she quickly pulled her sleeves down, shooting me a look that screamed, "Not now." Huxley clapped my shoulder with practiced familiarity, warning in his eyes. "She's been a little clumsy lately," he said with a hollow laugh. "You know how women can be, always bumping into things." Something was very wrong. The confident daughter I'd left had become a frightened animal, constantly glancing at her husband for approval. My granddaughter, who should have been running into my arms, cowered behind her mother like I was a threat. Standing in what should have been a joyful reunion, one thought crystallized with absolute clarity. I needed to find out what had happened to my family. And I had a sinking feeling the truth would be far worse than I could imagine. 3 hours later, I got my chance. Huxley left for a business meeting, though the whiskey smell suggested otherwise. Grace was napping, and the house felt different without his oppressive presence. Hannah sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. In the afternoon light, the bruises were even more visible, not just on her arms, but grip marks around her wrists. "Hannah," I said, gently pulling up a chair, "tell me about those bruises. Don't say you're clumsy. I raised you. You were the most coordinated kid on the block." She flinched, wrapping her arms defensively. "It's nothing, Dad. Just work accidents. I've been doing physical tasks, helping with renovations." Her voice wavered, avoiding my eyes. This wasn't my confident daughter who used to debate politics over Sunday dinner. I took her hand gently. "Hannah Rose Bennett," I said, using her full name like when she was little. "Remember what I promised the day you were born? I'd always protect you. That promise doesn't expire." The dam broke. her face crumpled, tears streaming. Her body shook as she collapsed into the frightened girl she'd become. "Oh, Daddy," she sobbed, using the name from childhood. "I messed up so bad. After Grace was born, I got sick. Really sick up here." She tapped her temple. "The doctor called it postpartum depression. I couldn't get out of bed some days. Couldn't take care of Grace. Huxley's family said they'd help take care of everything while I recovered." She wiped her nose, voice dropping to a whisper. "I was on heavy medication, Dad. Everything was foggy. I couldn't think straight. They kept bringing papers to sign. Insurance forms, they said. Medical authorizations. I signed whatever they put in front of me because I trusted them. My heart broke watching her relive this nightmare." "What kind of papers?" "Property transfer documents. Power of attorney forms. They said it was temporary, just until I was better. When the fog cleared, and I understood what I'd signed." She looked around the kitchen that should have been hers. "They told me I'd signed the house over, that I was now their live-in caregiver, working off the debt of their help." Rage built inside me, unlike anything I'd ever felt. These people had preyed on my daughter at her most vulnerable moment. They said if I didn't obey, if I tried to leave, they'd prove I was unfit and take Grace away. Her voice broke completely. "So I stayed. I've been their servant in my own home for 3 years, Dad." She walked to a kitchen drawer, pulling out a thick manila folder. "I kept everything. Medical records, the papers I signed, everything. I kept hoping someday someone would help me understand what really happened." As I opened that folder, one thought echoed. They had made the biggest mistake of their lives when they decided to mess with Jacob Bennett's daughter. That night, I spread Hannah's medical records across the kitchen table like a detective working a case. What I found made my blood run cold. The dates told a story of systematic exploitation that was even worse than I'd imagined. Hannah had signed the property transfer documents on March 15th. According to her medical chart, March 15th was also the day her psychiatrist had increased her antidepressant dosage to the maximum level due to a severe psychological episode. The next morning, I drove straight to Denver General Hospital where Hannah had received treatment. Dr. Patricia Morrison, her former psychiatrist, agreed to meet with me after I explained the situation. "Mr. Bennett," Dr. Morrison said, pulling Hannah's thick file from her cabinet, "I remember your daughter very well. Her case was one of the most severe postpartum depression episodes I've ever treated." She flipped through pages of notes, her expression growing more troubled. "During March of that year, Hannah was barely functional. We had her on sertraline, lorazepam, and quetiapine, heavy medications that severely impair cognitive function and decision-making ability." "What does that mean in practical terms?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "It means she was in no condition to make any legal decisions whatsoever. The medication levels we prescribed would have left her confused, disoriented, and highly suggestible. She shouldn't have been signing birthday cards, let alone property documents." Dr. Morrison called in Rebecca Walsh, the nurse who had worked most closely with Hannah during her treatment. Rebecca's face darkened when she heard what had happened. "Oh my God," Rebecca said, shaking her head. "I remember those days clearly. Hannah was so heavily medicated that some days she couldn't even recognize her own mother when she came to visit. She would stare at people like she was looking through fog. I specifically remember one afternoon when she tried to sign her name on a get-well card from her church group," Rebecca continued. "Her handwriting was so shaky and illegible that we had to help guide her hand. There's no way she could have understood complex legal documents." Dr. Morrison pulled out Hannah's medication log, pointing to the dates with her pen. "Look at this timeline, Mr. Bennett. March 10th through March 20th was her absolute worst period. We were considering hospitalization because she was barely responsive to verbal commands. And they had her sign legal papers during this time." I asked, my voice tight with rage. "If what you're telling me is true, then what they did was not just morally reprehensible. It was legally invalid," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "A person under this level of psychiatric medication cannot give informed consent for anything, especially something as significant as property transfer." Rebecca nodded emphatically. "I'd testify to that in court. Hannah couldn't have understood what day of the week it was, let alone the implications of signing away her house." Dr. Morrison handed me a printed summary of Hannah's treatment during that period. "Mr. Bennett, those signatures are legally worthless. No court in the country would uphold contracts signed by someone in Hannah's condition. What the Hamilton family did constitutes elder abuse and exploitation of a vulnerable adult." As I left the hospital with that medical summary in my hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. For the first time since I'd walked through that front door, I knew we had a real chance to fight back. The Hamilton family thought they were clever preying on a sick woman, but they'd just handed me the ammunition I needed to destroy them. Armed with Dr. Morrison's medical summary, I knew I needed professional help. A quick internet search led me to the law offices of Webb and Associates specialists in elder abuse and exploitation cases. Caroline Webb had a reputation for taking down powerful families who preyed on vulnerable people. Her downtown Denver office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower with panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains. Caroline herself was a woman in her early 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a sharp bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Bennett," she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her mahogany desk, "tell me about your daughter's situation. Don't leave out any details, no matter how small they might seem." I laid out everything: the degrading apron Hannah's postpartum depression, the suspicious timing of the document signings, and Dr. Morrison's medical assessment. Caroline took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking pointed questions about dates and witnesses. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her lips. "Mr. Bennett, this is textbook exploitation of a vulnerable adult. What the Hamilton family did isn't just morally despicable, it's a federal crime." She spread Hannah's medical records across her desk, cross-referencing them with photocopies of the property transfer documents I'd brought. "Look at this timeline. Your daughter signed away a $400,000 house while she was so heavily medicated she couldn't recognize her own mother. Any first-year law student could get these contracts voided. But here's what makes this case special," Caroline continued, her voice taking on a predatory edge. "The Hamilton family didn't just commit fraud. They created a pattern of ongoing abuse, forcing Hannah to wear that apron, making her work as an unpaid servant, threatening to take away her child. That's human trafficking, Mr. Bennett." My heart pounded as the full scope of what had happened to Hannah became clear. "What can we do about it?" "We're not just getting your daughter's house back," Caroline said firmly. "We're sending the Hamilton family to federal prison, but we need to be strategic about this." She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began outlining our plan. Step 1. We give them 48 hours to voluntarily return the property and pay damages. Some families get scared and settle when they realize they're caught. Step 2. If they refuse, we file both civil and criminal complaints simultaneously. Civil suit to recover the house and damages, criminal referral to the FBI for human trafficking and exploitation charges. Step 3. We contact the Denver Post. Public pressure can be incredibly effective, especially against families who care about their social standing. "And step 4, I asked. Caroline smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Step 4 is when we destroy them completely. Asset forfeiture, prison sentences, and civil judgments that will bankrupt them for generations." She stood up and extended her hand. "Mr. Bennett, I've been practicing law for 25 years, and I've never seen a case with stronger evidence. The Hamilton family picked the wrong victim when they targeted your daughter." "What do we do first?" I asked, shaking her hand. "Tomorrow morning, you and I are going to pay them a visit. We'll give them a chance to surrender peacefully. If they're smart, they'll take it." Her eyes glittered with anticipation. "If they're not, we'll teach them what happens when you mess with Jacob Bennett's family." Walking out of that office, I felt more powerful than I had in years. The Hamilton family was about to discover that their biggest mistake wasn't just exploiting my daughter. It was doing it while her father was still alive to fight back. The next morning, Caroline and I drove through the gates of the Hamilton estate in Cherry Hills Village. The mansion loomed before us. 3 stories of Colorado sandstone with towering columns displaying wealth built on exploitation. A butler led us through marble hallways lined with oil paintings of Hamilton ancestors. William Hamilton waited in his mahogany study, seated behind a massive desk. He was 70-something with silver hair and the soft features of inherited privilege. "Mr. Bennett," he said without rising voice, dripping condescension, "I understand you have concerns about your daughter's living arrangements. Hannah is very happy working for our family." "Working," I said, rage-controlled but visible. "You mean being your unpaid slave in her own house?" William laughed coldly. "You're nobody, Bennett. My family has owned this city for 4 generations. We have judges, politicians, and police commissioners in our pocket. You think one old man can threaten us?" Caroline stepped forward, placing a thick folder on his desk. Mr. Hamilton, I'm attorney Caroline Webb. These are your daughter-in-law's medical records from Denver General, along with expert testimony from her psychiatrist. She opened the folder precisely. On March 15th, Hannah signed property documents while under maximum dose psychiatric medications. Dr. Patricia Morrison states Hannah was so heavily medicated she couldn't recognize her own mother. William barely glanced at the documents. Hannah signed voluntarily. We have witnesses. You exploited my daughter's mental illness. I leaned forward. That's a federal crime, Hamilton. Human trafficking exploitation of a vulnerable adult fraud. Uncertainty flickered in William's eyes. He picked up the medical records, his confidence cracking as he read Dr. Morrison's assessment. This is ridiculous, he blustered, voice lacking conviction. Hannah needed help. We provided it. She's grateful. Caroline smiled like a shark. Grateful, is that why she wears an apron saying Hamilton family property? Why your son threatens to beat her? William's face flushed red. How dare you come into my home making these accusations? I'll have you arrested for harassment. Call the police, Caroline said calmly. I'd love explaining how your family held a mentally ill woman as an unpaid servant for 3 years. Huxley burst in, face twisted with rage. Dad, why are we talking to these people? Let me handle this the way we handle all our problems. Caroline didn't flinch at the threat. Mr. Hamilton, you have 48 hours to return Hannah's house and pay $1 million in damages. If you refuse, we file civil and criminal complaints with the FBI. William stood slowly, hands shaking with fury. You just declared war on the wrong family, Bennett. We'll destroy you and that pathetic daughter of yours. You already tried, I said, standing to face him. But you made one crucial mistake. You left me alive to fight back. Walking out, Caroline squeezed my arm. Perfect. They just made threats in front of witnesses. Now we have intimidation charges, too. The Hamilton family had 48 hours to surrender. Something told me they were too arrogant to take the offer. 47 hours later, the Hamilton family's silence gave Caroline all the answers she needed. The Denver Post's front page headline screamed, Wealthy family exploits daughter's mental illness to steal home. The article, written by investigative journalist Maria Santos, laid out every damning detail. Hannah's medical records and the suspicious timing of the property transfer and the degrading treatment she'd endured for 3 years. The accompanying photo showed our modest house on Cherry Creek Drive, next to the Hamilton mansion, a visual representation of David versus Goliath. Within hours, the story exploded across social media. Justice for Hannah began trending on Twitter, with thousands sharing their own stories of elder abuse and exploitation. Local news stations picked up the story, camping outside both our house and the Hamilton estate. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, knocked on our door that afternoon with a casserole and tears in her eyes. Jacob, I had no idea what Hannah was going through. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. Everyone wants to help. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. A GoFundMe page appeared overnight, raising money for Hannah's legal expenses. The Denver Women's Shelter offered counseling services. Even strangers stopped me on the street to express their outrage at what the Hamilton family had done. But the real victory came at 2 o'clock that afternoon, when Caroline called with news that made my heart soar. Jacob, get down to the courthouse immediately, she said, barely containing her excitement. Judge Elizabeth Barnes just granted our emergency injunction. Hannah gets her house back today. At the Denver County Courthouse, Judge Barnes's voice rang with authority as she addressed the packed courtroom. Based on the medical evidence presented, it's clear that Ms. Hannah Bennett Hamilton was not competent to sign these documents. The property transfer is hereby declared null and void, effective immediately. The Hamilton family's high-priced lawyers looked stunned. William Hamilton's face turned purple with rage, while Huxley had to be physically restrained by courthouse security when he started shouting threats. Furthermore, Judge Barnes continued, I'm granting a temporary restraining order. The Hamilton family is prohibited from contacting or approaching Ms. Bennett or her family. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. 2 hours later, I watched from our front porch as Denver police officers escorted Hannah and Grace home. Hannah carried a single suitcase, everything the Hamilton family had allowed her to keep from her old life. Grace clutched a worn teddy bear, her eyes wide with confusion about why police officers were helping them. Daddy, Grace whispered to Hannah as they walked up the front steps, are we really going to live here now? Yes, sweetheart, Hannah said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We're home. We're finally home." That evening, as we sat around the kitchen table eating Mrs. Rodriguez's casserole, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Huxley's number. "Answer it," Caroline advised, holding up her own phone to record. "Let's see how stupid he really is." I put the call on speaker. Huxley's voice was slurred with alcohol and rage. "This war isn't over, old man. You think you've won? We will destroy you all. You have no idea what we're capable of." "Are you threatening my family?" I asked calmly. "I'm promising you," Huxley snarled. "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. Soon you'll wish you'd never come back from Singapore." The line went dead. Caroline smiled grimly as she stopped her recording. "Congratulations, Jacob. He just handed us another felony charge." That night, as Hannah tucked Grace into her own bedroom. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I hadn't experienced since walking through that front door a week ago: hope. But Huxley's threats echoed in my mind. This battle was won, but the war was far from over. The first week back in our house felt like stepping into a dream I'd been having for 10 years. Every morning I woke up to Grace's laughter echoing through the hallways, a sound absent from these walls for far too long. Hannah moved through rooms like someone rediscovering a forgotten language, pausing in doorways, running fingers along familiar surfaces, as memories of happier times flooded back. "Dad," she said one morning, finding me making pancakes, "I forgot how good coffee tastes when you're not afraid someone's going to scream at you." Grace slowly warmed up to me, her shyness melting as she realized I wasn't leaving. The breakthrough came Tuesday afternoon when I found her struggling with a bicycle clearly too small for her. "Need help there, sweetheart?" I asked, crouching beside her. She looked up with Hannah's eyes full of determination and frustration. "I want to ride like the big kids, but my bike is too baby." That afternoon we bought a bright pink bicycle with training wheels and streamers. Watching Grace's face light up as she pedaled around our driveway was worth every sleepless night in Singapore. I threw myself into fixing the neglected house. Loose floorboards, leaky faucets, peeling paint, small projects that kept me busy while watching my family. Hannah surprised me by joining in. Together we repainted Grace's bedroom. Yellow hung new curtains and planted flowers in the front garden. "Remember when you taught me to use a drill?" Hannah asked one evening as we assembled Grace's bookshelf. "I was 12 and Mom was convinced I'd put a hole through the wall." "You did put holes through the wall?" I laughed. 3 holes. Your mother made me sleep on the couch for a week. Evenings were the best part. Real family meals with conversation and laughter instead of tense silence. Grace would chatter about her day, showing drawings or asking me to read her favorite story about a brave little mouse. "Grandpa," she said one night, the word rolling off her tongue naturally for the first time, "will you read me the mouse story again?" My heart nearly burst. "Of course, sweetheart. As many times as you want." Hannah caught my eye and smiled. A real smile, not the forced expression from when I first arrived. "Dad," she whispered later while cleaning dishes, "I forgot what happiness felt like. Thank you for giving it back." For 10 days we lived in this bubble of contentment. Grace called me Grandpa regularly. Hannah's bruises faded and the haunted look in her eyes began disappearing. We were becoming a real family again. But Thursday night, as I tucked Grace into bed, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar local number. "Don't answer it," Hannah said, appearing in the doorway with worry etched across her face. But I did answer. Huxley's voice was cold and sober this time, more frightening than his drunken rage. "Enjoying your little family reunion, old man," he said. "Don't get too comfortable. Some storms you can't see coming until they're right on top of you." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, while Grace asked, "Grandpa, who was that? You look scared." I forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "Nobody important, sweetheart. Just a wrong number." But as I turned off her bedroom light, I couldn't shake the feeling that our peaceful days were numbered. 2 nights later, a violent thunderstorm rolled across Denver, rattling our windows and sending sheets of rain against the house. I was lying in bed listening to the wind howl when I heard something that didn't belong. Footsteps on our front porch, slow and deliberate. I slipped out of bed and peered through the bedroom curtains. Lightning illuminated a figure moving around the perimeter of our house, carrying what looked like a gas can. The acrid smell of gasoline began seeping through the walls. Huxley had come to make good on his promise. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as I ran down the hallway. "There's a man with gasoline trying to burn down my house on Cherry Creek Drive." I whispered urgently to the dispatcher. Sir, we're dispatching units immediately. Get your family out of the house now. But before I could reach Hannah's room, I heard the whoosh of flames igniting outside. Orange light flickered through the living room windows as fire raced around the foundation of our house. Huxley's voice rose above the storm, screaming like a man who'd lost his mind. "You destroyed my family," he shrieked. "Now I'll destroy yours. Burn it all down. Burn it all." I burst into Hannah's bedroom, shaking her awake. "Hannah, we have to go. Now! The house is on fire." She bolted upright, instantly alert. "Grace?" We ran to Grace's room together. She was already awake, sitting up in bed and crying as smoke began seeping under her door. The hallway was filling with thick black smoke that burned our lungs and stung our eyes. "Mommy, I'm scared," Grace sobbed as Hannah scooped her up. "I know, baby. Grandpa's going to get us out of here." The front door was blocked by flames, so I led them toward the back of the house. But as we reached the kitchen, Huxley appeared at the sliding glass door, his face twisted with rage and illuminated by the fire he'd set. He was holding a crowbar. "Nobody leaves," he screamed, smashing the glass. "If I can't have my family, nobody gets to have theirs." I pushed Hannah and Grace behind me, grabbing a kitchen knife from the counter. "Hannah, Grace, get out through the side window in the dining room. Go." "I'm not leaving you," Hannah cried. "Go," I roared. "Protect Grace." Huxley swung the crowbar at my head, but rage had made him clumsy. I ducked and tackled him around the waist, sending us both crashing into the kitchen cabinets. The knife skittered across the floor as we grappled. "You want to hurt my family?" I gasped, fighting for leverage as smoke filled the room. "You'll have to go through me first." Huxley was younger and stronger, but I had 40 years of suppressed fury driving me. Every sleepless night in Singapore, every tear Hannah had shed, every moment of Grace's childhood, I'd missed. It all poured into my fists as we fought. The sound of sirens cut through the storm just as I managed to pin Huxley to the floor. Through the broken sliding door, I could see flashing red and blue lights as fire trucks and police cars flooded our street. Denver police, everyone out of the house. I dragged the semi-conscious Huxley toward the back door as firefighters burst through the front entrance, their hoses already spraying water on the flames that were consuming our home. Outside in the rain, I found Hannah and Grace huddled together on the neighbor's lawn, both safe but shaking with terror. Grace ran to me the moment she saw me emerge from the smoke. "Grandpa, I thought you were gone." I knelt down and pulled both of them into my arms as paramedics checked us for smoke inhalation and police officers handcuffed Huxley. Our house was damaged, but still standing, the fire department having arrived just in time to prevent total destruction. "It's over," I whispered into Hannah's hair as we watched them load Huxley into a police car. "He can never hurt you again." 6 months later, I sat in Denver County Courthouse, watching Judge Elizabeth Barnes deliver the final chapter of our story. The courtroom was packed with supporters who had followed our case from the beginning. Huxley sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance replaced by the hollow stare of a broken man. "Mr. Huxley Hamilton," Judge Barnes said with absolute authority, "you have been found guilty of arson, attempted murder, domestic violence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison without parole." The gavel came down with satisfying finality. Huxley didn't flinch as bailiffs led him away in shackles. 2 weeks earlier, William Hamilton had been sentenced to 8 years for exploitation of vulnerable adult fraud and conspiracy. The Hamilton empire had crumbled overnight. Assets, frozen properties seized their names synonymous with shame. Caroline squeezed my hand. "It's over, Jacob. They can never hurt anyone again." The court-ordered restitution was substantial. The Hamilton family paid $2 million in damages. Compensation for the stolen house, Hannah's unpaid labor, emotional trauma, and fire damage. Their mansion cars and business assets were liquidated to pay what they owed us. We used the money to rebuild from the ground up. The new home had bigger windows, a modern kitchen, and a spacious master suite, where I'd moved my belongings from Singapore because I wasn't going anywhere. Dad Hannah had said when I announced I was moving to Denver permanently, "Are you sure you worked so hard in Singapore?" "My life isn't in Singapore," I'd replied. "My life is wherever my family is." The best addition was Grace's backyard playground, with swing set slide and sandbox. Every evening I'd push her on swings while Hannah tended her flower garden. "Higher, Grandpa." Grace would squeal her laughter, echoing across the neighborhood. At 5 years old, Grace had grown into a confident, joyful child who knew she was loved and protected. She called me Grandpa naturally and insisted I read her the brave little mouse story every night. Hannah had blossomed too. The haunted look was gone, replaced by the spark of the strong woman I'd raised. She'd started night classes working toward a social work degree. I want to help other women who've been through what I experienced, she'd told me. Show them there's always hope. This evening, as I pushed Grace on her swing, Hannah came out carrying 3 glasses of lemonade. She sat on the porch steps, watching us with a radiant smile. "Grandpa," Grace said, slowing her swing to look at me seriously, "will you live with us forever and always?" I caught the swing and knelt to her level, looking into those brown eyes so much like her mother's. "Forever and always, sweetheart. Wild horses couldn't drag me away." "Dad," Hannah called from the porch, voice thick with emotion, "thank you for saving us. Thank you for never giving up." As the sun set over Denver and Grace ran off to chase fireflies, I realized this moment, this perfect ordinary evening with my family, was worth more than all my success in Singapore. Looking back on this journey, I realized how close I came to losing everything that truly mattered. For 10 years I chased success in Singapore while my daughter suffered in silence. Don't make my mistake. Don't let career ambitions blind you to your family's pain. This true story taught me that God has a way of bringing us home when we're needed most. I believe the Lord guided me back to Denver at exactly the right moment, just as He guides all of us through our darkest hours. Sometimes what looks like coincidence is actually divine intervention. The Hamilton family thought they could exploit a vulnerable woman without consequences. But they forgot that God sees everything, and justice always finds its way. Hannah's strength during those 3 terrible years showed me that faith can sustain us through unimaginable hardship. These grandpa stories aren't just about my experience. They're about the power of family bonds that can never truly be broken. When I saw Grace hiding behind her mother, afraid of the grandfather she barely knew, I understood the price of my absence. But love has a way of healing even the deepest wounds. If you're working far from home, remember that no amount of money can replace the moments you miss with your children and grandchildren. Success means nothing if your family is suffering while you're away. This true story could have ended very differently if I'd arrived even a few weeks later. The greatest blessing wasn't the court victory or the new house. It was Grace calling me Grandpa with genuine love in her voice. These grandpa stories remind us that being present is the most precious gift we can give our families. That's why I share these grandpa stories, to inspire other grandfathers to prioritize what truly matters. Don't wait for a crisis to bring you home. Don't assume your loved ones are okay just because they don't complain. And never underestimate the power of a parent's love to move mountains when their child needs them. This true story changed all our lives forever. Hannah found her strength. Grace learned she was protected, and I discovered that home isn't a place. It's the people who love you unconditionally. If this story touched your heart, please share your own family experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true stories that celebrate the unbreakable bonds of family love. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. On Christmas morning, my son Silas called and said, "Dad, maybe he should just stay home this year." He meant my 19-year-old Danny, my autistic son. I didn't argue. I simply said, "I understand," and hung up. That evening, Danny and I created our own Christmas. By nightfall, my phone was buzzing nonstop, 25 missed calls. I had no idea that our quiet decision would soon become the story that changed everything. I'm grateful you're here listening to this story. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? The smell of cinnamon rolls filled our little house on Cedar Avenue as Christmas morning light streamed through the kitchen windows. I stood at the counter watching my 19-year-old son Danny's fingers dance across the old upright piano we'd moved to the living room years ago. His autism made the world overwhelming sometimes, but when he played, everything made perfect sense. Danny had been up since dawn, not because of presents waiting under the tree, but because Christmas morning meant music. He'd already worked through 3 different arrangements of White Christmas, each one more beautiful than the last. His gift wasn't just playing what he heard. He could transform any melody into something entirely his own. "That's gorgeous, son," I called out, wiping flour from my hands. At 59, I'd learned to treasure these quiet moments. 4 years since my wife Grace passed, it had been just Danny and me figuring out life together in this old house in Denver. Some days were harder than others, but mornings like this reminded me we were doing okay. The phone rang just as Danny transitioned into a jazz version of Silent Night. I almost didn't answer. Christmas morning calls usually meant family obligations, and we'd been planning a peaceful day at home. But the caller ID showed Silas, and despite everything, he was still my older son. "Morning, Dad." His voice carried that familiar distance, the careful tone he'd perfected over the years whenever Danny came up in conversation. "Merry Christmas, Silas. How are Scarlett and Olivia?" "Good, good. Listen, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about tonight." He paused, and I could hear voices in the background. Probably Scarlett's family gathering for their elaborate Christmas dinner. Maybe he should just stay home this year. Not Danny, not your brother, just he. The words hit exactly as intended. No explanation needed, no details required. We both knew who he was and why Silas thought he should stay home. The careful politeness in his voice made it worse somehow, like he was discussing a scheduling conflict instead of excluding his own brother from Christmas. I looked across the room at Danny, completely absorbed in his music, unaware that his existence was being debated like a problem to be solved. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he leaned into a particularly complex passage, his whole body moving with the rhythm only he could hear. "I understand," I said quietly, and I did understand. I understood that my older son was ashamed of his brother. I understood that Danny's stimming and occasional outbursts made Silas uncomfortable around his in-laws. I understood that it was easier to exclude than to educate, easier to hide than to defend. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd get it. Maybe we can do something next week, just us." Just us. The phrase hung in the air after he hung up bitter as burnt coffee. Danny looked up from the piano, his brown eyes bright with the joy that music always brought him. "Dad, do you want to hear the song I wrote for Mom?" My chest tightened. Every Christmas he composed something new for Grace, playing it to her photo on the mantel. This year's piece would be beautiful, heartbreaking, and completely wasted on an empty house if we followed Silas's plan. I walked over and sat beside him on the piano bench, the same spot where Grace used to sit during his evening concerts. "Are we going to have Christmas dinner with Silas tonight?" "Dad," Danny asked, his voice hopeful in that innocent way that always broke my heart. The question hung in the air. I could lie, make excuses, protect him from the truth for another year, or I could do something different. "You know what, Danny, we'll make our own Christmas." His face lit up with the kind of pure happiness that reminded me why I'd fight the whole world for this kid. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I'd made up my mind. Danny deserved better than hiding at home because his brother was embarrassed. I grabbed my coat and turned to him. "Get your jacket, son. We're going out." The Riverside Community Center sat just 6 blocks from our house, a modest brick building that hosted everything from senior yoga to kids' birthday parties. I'd heard Helen Martinez, our neighbor from 2 streets over, mention their Christmas potluck for folks spending the holiday alone. Seemed like the perfect place for our own Christmas celebration. Helen's face lit up when she saw us walk through the double doors. "Emmerich, Danny, I'm so glad you came." She wore a bright red sweater with a reindeer that had actual jingle bells, and her smile was warmer than any fancy family dinner could ever be. The main hall buzzed with quiet conversation. About 30 people milled around tables covered in mismatched dishes, homemade casseroles, store-bought cookies, someone's famous green bean salad. These weren't society folks putting on airs. These were real people, elderly widows, single parents working holiday shifts, college students too far from home. Danny hung close to my side, at first overwhelmed by the unfamiliar voices and holiday music playing from someone's portable speaker. But Helen had a gift for making people comfortable. "Danny, I remember your mom mentioning you play piano," she said gently. "We've got that old upright in the corner if you'd like to try it out. No pressure, just if you feel like it." I followed his gaze to the corner where a weathered piano sat beneath strings of twinkling lights. Someone had placed a small poinsettia on top, and sheet music was scattered across the bench. Danny's eyes held that familiar spark I knew so well. "It's okay if you want to play," I told him. He approached the piano like he was meeting an old friend. His fingers found the keys, testing the tone, adjusting to the slightly out-of-tune middle C. Then, without any fanfare, he began. What started as Silent Night became something else entirely. Danny's version wove in jazz harmonies I'd never heard before, building layers of melody that seemed to wrap around the room like a warm blanket. Conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the kids playing in the corner grew quiet. When the last note faded, the silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then applause erupted. Not polite party clapping, but the kind of appreciation reserved for something truly special. "That was incredible," whispered Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman I'd seen walking her dog around the neighborhood. "Just beautiful." Helen had tears in her eyes. "Danny, that was a gift. A real Christmas gift to all of us." I noticed she'd been holding up her phone, and something told me she'd captured more than just a memory. As we helped clean up later, people kept approaching Danny with genuine warmth. No awkward stares, no whispered questions about his condition, just appreciation for what he'd shared with them. Walking home under the streetlights, Danny hummed his arrangement while snow began to fall. For the first time all day, I felt like we'd made the right choice. That feeling lasted exactly until we stepped through our front door, and I saw my phone blinking with notifications. 25 missed calls. I woke up Boxing Day morning to my phone buzzing like an angry wasp. 7:30 a.m. and notifications were pouring in faster than I could read them. Facebook text messages, voicemails, my phone hadn't stopped since we'd gotten home. Helen had posted the video. Christmas Miracle Boy. She'd titled it with a simple caption, "Sometimes the most beautiful gifts come from the most beautiful hearts." This young man made our Christmas unforgettable. The numbers were staggering. 50,000 views overnight, 1,000 shares, 500 comments, and they kept coming. "This made me cry at work," wrote someone named Jennifer from Ohio. "What a gift," commented a music teacher from Portland. "Beautiful soul, this is what Christmas is really about." I scrolled through comment after comment, my coffee growing cold, as strangers from across the country poured out their hearts. Parents of autistic children sharing their own stories. Musicians praising Danny's natural talent. People simply moved by the pure joy they'd witnessed. By noon, the video had jumped platforms. Someone had shared it to TikTok, where it exploded again. YouTube versions started appearing with titles like "Autistic Teen's Christmas Piano. Performance will make you believe in magic." The hashtag Christmas Miracle Boy was trending in Denver, then Colorado, then nationally. Danny wandered into the kitchen around 10, completely oblivious to the digital storm swirling around him. "Morning, Dad. Can we have pancakes?" "Sure, son." I tried to keep my voice steady as my phone rang for the dozenth time. Channel 7. News this time. "Mr. Sullivan. This is Maria Rodriguez from Denver 7. We'd love to do a feature story on your son's incredible performance yesterday. Would you be available for an interview? An interview on television about Danny." I looked at my son happily mixing batter and humming yesterday's arrangement. He had no idea that millions of people were watching him, sharing his music, calling him a miracle. To him, it was just another morning, just another song. "I'll need to think about it," I told the reporter. But they kept calling. The Denver Post wanted a story. Good Morning Colorado requested a live appearance. Radio stations, podcasts, even a talent agent from Los Angeles, who somehow got my number. "Dad, why is your phone so noisy?" Danny asked, covering his ears as another call came in. "People liked your music, son. They really, really liked it." His face lit up with that pure happiness that had no agenda, no calculation. "That's nice. Can I play more songs for them?" The innocence of it broke my heart. While the world was discovering Danny's gift, his own brother had wanted to hide him away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Strangers were celebrating what family had rejected. By evening, I'd given 3 phone interviews and declined a dozen more. The story was spreading beyond Colorado now. Christmas Miracle Boy had over 2 million mentions. Videos of Danny's performance were being shared in languages I couldn't even identify. I was scrolling through messages of support when my phone rang with a familiar number. Silas. For the first time in months, I almost didn't want to answer. "Dad, we need to talk." His voice was different, careful but not cold, almost apologetic. "I'm listening. We saw the video. Everyone's seen the video. Scarlett's been getting calls all day from friends asking about Danny." He paused. "Maybe we made a mistake yesterday." 10 days later, Silas called with an invitation that caught me off guard. "Dad, it's Olivia's birthday this weekend. She specifically asked if Grandpa and Uncle Danny could come. Scarlett and I talked, and we'd really like you both there." No mention of the video. No acknowledgement of what had happened on Christmas. Just a simple invitation that felt almost normal. I stared out the kitchen window where Danny was building a snowman, his cheeks red with cold and joy. The viral video had brought interview requests from 3 more news stations, but we declined them all. Danny was happy just being Danny. "You sure about this, Silas?" "Of course, Dad. Olivia's been talking about it all week. She wants Uncle Danny to play Happy Birthday on the piano. Saturday afternoon found us standing on the doorstep of Silas's house in Highlands Ranch, a sprawling suburban palace with balloons tied to the mailbox and luxury cars lining the circular driveway. Scarlett opened the door wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emmerich Danny, so wonderful you could make it. Her voice carried that practiced cheerfulness of someone hosting a party they weren't entirely comfortable with. Olivia, however, was genuinely thrilled. She launched herself at my legs with 8-year-old enthusiasm. Grandpa, you came, and Uncle Danny. She grabbed Danny's hand without hesitation, chattering about her new bike and the chocolate cake waiting inside. The backyard was full of families from Scarlett's country club circle, parents whose kids attended the same private school as Olivia. They smiled politely when introduced, but I caught the subtle glances the way conversations paused, when Danny stimmed or hummed quietly to himself. He's the one from the video, I heard someone whisper. For an hour, everything seemed promising. Danny played games with the kids, his gentle nature winning over even the most hesitant children. Olivia appointed herself his official guide, showing him her playhouse, and introducing him to her friends as my super cool uncle who plays piano like magic. Then Scarlett announced lunch. The main table was set beautifully, matching plates, cloth napkins, winter flowers as centerpieces. Enough seats for all the adults and older kids. I looked for Danny's place setting, expecting to see it beside mine. Oh, we set up a quiet spot for Danny, Scarlett said, quickly gesturing toward the kitchen door. Somewhere he'll be more comfortable. Away from all the noise and excitement. I followed her gesture and felt my stomach drop. Through the kitchen doorway sat a single plastic chair at the breakfast counter, a paper plate, a juice box instead of the fancy drinks being served outside. Hidden, separate, shameful. You're hiding him like he's shameful. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Silas stepped forward, hands raised in that placating gesture I'd grown to hate. Dad, the other parents might not understand. Some of these kids have never been around someone like Danny. We thought it would be easier for everyone. Easier for who? I grabbed Danny's hand, my voice shaking with fury. You haven't learned anything. Nothing at all. Grandpa. Olivia's small voice cut through my anger. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Why is Grandpa leaving? Did I do something wrong? My heart broke for her, but I couldn't stay. Not when my own son still saw his brother as a problem to be managed, an embarrassment to be hidden from polite company. In the car, Danny was quiet for several blocks before asking, Did I mess up the party, Dad? No, son, you didn't mess up anything. But as I drove home through the January afternoon, one thought echoed with crystal clarity. Nothing will ever change. They would never see Danny as anything more than an inconvenience. It was time to stop waiting for them to come around. Sunday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If they won't accept Danny, we'll find people who will. Danny, how would you feel about an adventure? I asked over breakfast, watching his face light up at the word. What kind of adventure, Dad? The musical kind? Pack your bags, son. We're going to Nashville. Within 2 hours, I'd loaded our Honda Civic with everything we'd need. Danny's portable keyboard, my old camera, enough clothes for a week, and a cooler full of sandwiches Grace used to make for our family road trips. Danny bounced in the passenger seat, more excited than I'd seen him since Christmas morning. The 12-hour drive to Nashville gave us something we hadn't had in months, uninterrupted time together. Danny sang along to every song on the radio, his voice weaving harmonies I'd never heard before. Somewhere outside Kansas City, he started composing lyrics about highway signs and truck stops, turning our mundane journey into something magical. Dad, look at those clouds, he said, pointing out the window. They look like piano keys. I followed his gaze and smiled. Only Danny could see music in a January sky. We rolled into Nashville Tuesday evening, the city's neon lights reflecting off the Cumberland River. Broadway Street pulsed with honky-tonk music spilling from every doorway. Street musicians on corners, tourists snapping photos with guitars and cowboy hats. It's so loud, Danny said, covering his ears as we walked past the crowded bars. We'll find somewhere quieter. I promised. Wednesday morning brought us to Centennial Park, where a weathered, upright piano sat under a pavilion, part of Nashville's Play Me I'm Yours public art project. A few joggers passed by, but mostly we had the space to ourselves. Want to try it out? I asked. Danny approached the piano like he was greeting an old friend. His fingers found familiar keys, then began transforming Amazing Grace into something that belonged in these rolling Tennessee hills. The melody stayed true, but he added country flourishes, a little twang here, a gospel run there. A jogger stopped, then a couple walking their dog. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, phones appearing as people captured this unexpected morning concert. "Kid's got real talent," said a man in a cowboy hat who introduced himself as a session musician. "Y'all visiting from out of town?" "Denver," I replied, watching Danny lose himself in the music. "We're on a musical journey." When Danny finished, the applause was genuine and warm. Someone dropped a 20 in his keyboard case. A grandmother asked for his autograph. A teenager requested "Sweet Caroline," which Danny delivered with a country twist that had everyone singing along. That evening I posted our first video, Danny and Dad's Musical Journey, Day 1. Simple footage of Danny at the piano, the Nashville skyline in the background, strangers becoming friends through music. The response was immediate. 100,000 views in 2 hours. Comments pouring in from around the world. "Where are you going next?" asked a viewer from Australia. "This is beautiful," wrote a music teacher from Maine. "Following your journey. More cities, please," requested someone from Texas. I looked at Danny peacefully reading a book about famous pianists, completely unaware that our adventure was just beginning to capture hearts across the globe. Tomorrow we'd head south to New Orleans. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like we were exactly where we belonged. From Nashville, we headed south like musical nomads, chasing melodies across America. New Orleans welcomed us with jazz flowing from every doorway in the French Quarter. Danny discovered a piano at Jackson Square, where street musicians had been gathering for decades. Within hours, he was jamming with a trumpet player named Marcus and a drummer called Big Joe, their impromptu trio, drawing crowds thick enough to stop traffic. "Kid plays like he's been doing this his whole life," Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement as Danny wove complex jazz harmonies around a simple melody. The video I posted that evening, Danny plays jazz in NOLA, exploded beyond anything we'd seen. 500,000 views overnight. Comments in French, Spanish languages I couldn't even identify. The hashtag Chachers Danny and Dad was trending not just in America, but internationally. Memphis came next, where Beale Street's blues legacy called to Danny like a siren song. At Handy Park, he sat down at another public piano and transformed traditional blues into something entirely his own. The crowd that gathered was different here. Older, more knowing people who'd heard real blues their whole lives. When Danny finished a haunting version of Summertime, an elderly man with tears in his eyes pressed a worn harmonica into his hands. "For luck, son, you got the gift." Chicago's Millennium Park offered yet another musical education. The classical setting inspired Danny to attempt Chopin, his interpretation so moving that passing businessmen stopped mid-conversation. Phones forgotten as they listened to this young man make a public piano sing like a concert hall Steinway. Each city taught Danny something new, and he absorbed it all like a musical sponge. Jazz runs from New Orleans blues, soul from Memphis, classical precision from Chicago. Our followers grew from thousands to millions. Fan mail arrived at hotels we'd booked days in advance. Interview requests from major networks. Donation offers we politely declined. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments between performances. Danny and I sharing po' boys in a New Orleans cafe, him humming new melodies while I drove through the night. Hotel rooms where he'd practice on his keyboard with headphones, while I answered emails from strangers whose lives had been touched by his music. "Dad, I like this adventure," he said one evening in Chicago, looking out at the city lights. "People here understand my music. They understand you, son, the real you." For the first time in his 19 years, Danny was experiencing the world not as someone to be managed or accommodated, but as someone to be celebrated. His confidence bloomed like spring flowers, and my pride threatened to burst my chest. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Frederick Harrison from Carnegie Hall. We've been following Danny's journey, and we'd like to invite him to perform on our main stage." I nearly dropped the phone. "Carnegie Hall, are you serious?" "Completely serious. We have an opening on Valentine's Day. Would Danny be interested?" I looked at my son, who was composing something new on his keyboard, completely absorbed in creating beauty from nothing. "Danny, how would you feel about playing at the most famous concert hall in America?" He looked up, eyes bright with curiosity. "Will there be people there who like music? The people who love music most in the world?" "Then yes, please." As I confirmed the booking with Frederick, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Grace died. Pure, uncomplicated joy. We'd found our tribe, our purpose, our place in the world. For this perfect moment, nothing else mattered. The call from Frederick Harrison had barely ended when I noticed the first cracks in our perfect world. It started with the comments. Scrolling through Danny's latest Chicago video that evening, I found messages I hadn't seen before mixed in with the usual praise. This is child exploitation. Where's social services? That man is using his disabled son for money. Someone needs to rescue this poor kid from his fame-hungry father. I frowned, refreshing the page. More appeared, all with similar language posted by accounts I'd never seen before. Emmerich Truth and Concerned Viewer seemed particularly active, commenting identical accusations across multiple videos. By morning, the negative comments had multiplied like a virus. Every platform, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, suddenly flooded with the same accusations. The timing felt too coordinated to be coincidence. Then the media coverage shifted. Channel 7. Denver ran a follow-up piece I caught on my phone. Local father's viral journey, inspiration or exploitation. The same station that had celebrated Danny's talent just days before was now questioning my motives. Child welfare experts are weighing in with concerns about commodifying disability, the reporter announced over footage of Danny playing piano. My stomach dropped. Someone was feeding them this narrative. The doubt spread quickly. Even longtime supporters began asking questions in the comments. Is Danny okay with all this attention? Does he understand what's happening to him? I tried to focus on the positive responses, and there were still thousands of them. But the accusations gnawed at me. Who would orchestrate something like this? Who had the motivation to destroy what Danny and I had built? The answer came with a phone call that made my hands shake. Mr. Sullivan. This is Jennifer Martinez from Colorado Department of Human Services. We've received several reports about your son's welfare. We need to schedule an investigation. Investigation? My voice cracked. Danny is perfectly fine. We're on a musical tour. Sir, we have concerns about potential exploitation of a vulnerable individual. Multiple sources have contacted us with detailed allegations. We'll need to interview both you and Danny within 48 hours, or we'll issue a warrant for his protective custody. The room spun around me. Protective custody. They wanted to take Danny away. We're in Chicago right now preparing for a Carnegie Hall performance. Mr. Sullivan, I suggest you return to Colorado immediately. This is not optional. After she hung up, I sat on the hotel bed staring at my phone. The systematic nature of the attack, the timing, the inside knowledge of our location, it all pointed to someone who knew us personally, someone who had access to our family information, someone who felt threatened by our success. That evening, Helen called from Denver, her voice tight with concern. Emmerich, I've been hearing things in the neighborhood. People are asking questions about why Danny isn't with his family. There are rumors going around that you kidnapped him or something equally ridiculous. Helen's social services is threatening to take Danny away. Someone's been spreading lies about us. I know, honey. I've seen the comments online. But Emmerich, you need to tell the truth publicly about Christmas, about why you really left Denver. These lies are spreading too fast, and people don't know the real story. I looked at Danny, peacefully practicing for Carnegie Hall, unaware that our world was collapsing around us. She was right. The only way to fight lies was with truth. But telling the truth meant exposing my own family's cruelty. It meant burning bridges that could never be rebuilt. It meant choosing Danny over everyone else once and for all. I spent most of January 21st staring at my laptop screen cursor hovering over the Go Live button. Danny practiced quietly in the corner of our Chicago hotel room, unaware that I was about to change everything. At 7 p.m. I finally clicked it. The truth about Danny and Dad, live. Within seconds, viewers started flooding in. The chat exploded immediately. Finally, tell us the truth. We're here for you. What really happened? My hands shook as I adjusted the camera angle. 50 people became 500, then 5,000. The numbers climbed so fast I couldn't track them. Thank you for joining me. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. You deserve the whole story. The real story about why Danny and I are on this journey. I took a deep breath and told them everything. The Christmas morning call, the birthday party kitchen seating, the coordinated attack on our videos after we found success and happiness. Danny looked up from his keyboard, smiled at the camera, and went back to playing softly. A gentle soundtrack to the hardest conversation of my life. The viewer count hit 25,000. Comments poured in faster than the system could display them. This is heartbreaking. Your family is disgusting. Danny deserves better. You're an amazing father. I showed screenshots of the fake comments, the systematic campaign designed to destroy us. These aren't random concerned citizens. This is my own family trying to tear us down because we found happiness without them. Because Danny's autism isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. Danny isn't a burden, I continued, my voice breaking slightly. He's a gift to the world. Every city we've visited, people see what I see. A young man with extraordinary talent and a beautiful soul. The only people who can't see it are the ones who share his DNA. I gestured to Danny, who had been listening while he played. Son, would you play the song from our first Christmas together? The one from the community center? Danny's face lit up. He positioned his hands over the keyboard and began Silent Night, the same arrangement that had started our journey, but somehow even more beautiful now. The melody filled the hotel room while 50,000 people watched in complete silence. When he finished, the chat exploded. I'm crying. That was beautiful. Justice for Danny. Shame on that family. This is why we travel, I said as Danny continued playing softly. This is why we perform. Because Danny deserves a world that sees his worth. And if his own family won't give him that world, then we'll find it ourselves. The live stream ended with over 50,000 viewers and thousands of shares, already spreading across social media. The truth was out there now, impossible to take back. For the first time since the attack began, I felt like I could breathe again. The aftermath of the live stream was swift and devastating. By morning, the story had exploded across every social media platform. Justice for Danny trended worldwide, but back in Denver, the consequences for Silas and Scarlett were immediate and brutal. Silas's marketing firm received hundreds of complaints from clients threatening to pull their business. We don't work with companies that employ people who abandon disabled family members. One email, raid. His colleagues avoided him in hallways, and within a week, he was quietly asked to take indefinite leave. Scarlett fared no better. Her country club friends stopped returning calls. Parents at Olivia's school whispered in pickup lines. The perfect suburban image they'd protected by rejecting Danny had crumbled completely. Meanwhile, Colorado Department of Human Services called me with a very different tone. Mr. Sullivan, after reviewing the evidence and interviewing multiple witnesses, were closing this case. No evidence of abuse and overwhelming evidence of appropriate care. The social services investigation that had terrified me vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Carnegie Hall confirmed our Valentine's Day performance with enthusiasm. We're honored to host Danny, Frederick told me. This is exactly what our stage was built for. February 14th arrived crisp and clear. Walking into Carnegie Hall, Danny's eyes went wide at the red velvet seats and golden ceiling. It's so beautiful, Dad, like a music box. The theater was sold out. As we waited backstage, Danny seemed remarkably calm, warming up with the same focus he'd had at every street corner. When Danny walked onto that legendary stage, the audience rose to their feet before he'd even touched the keys. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Then he began Silent Night, flowing seamlessly into Amazing Grace, then into an original composition he'd been working on during our travels, a piece he called Journey Home. The music filled every corner of that sacred space, and I watched 2,000 people experience what I'd known all along. Danny wasn't disabled, he was differently gifted. When the final note faded, the theater erupted. People wept openly. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Backstage afterward, Danny hugged me tightly. Dad, are you happy? Yes, son, we're free. 6 months later, we'd found our rhythm. Regular performances at venues that welcomed Danny's gifts. A small apartment in Nashville where he could practice without worrying about neighbors who didn't understand. A community of musicians, autism families, and supporters who saw Danny for who he truly was. Helen visited us in our new place, bringing homemade cookies and updates from Denver. Everyone knows you did the right thing, she said quietly. Even people who used to ask nosy questions about Danny have changed completely after seeing his success. She paused, then added, Silas lost his job. Scarlett barely leaves the house anymore. Olivia asks about you and Danny constantly. I felt a pang for my granddaughter, but not for the choices her parents had made. That evening, as Danny composed a new piece inspired by the Nashville skyline, I reflected on our journey. Sometimes you have to leave to find your real home. Sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. Dad, I'm glad we went on our adventure, Danny said, looking up from his keyboard. Me too, son, me too. Outside our window, Nashville hummed with music, and somewhere in the distance, a street musician played for tourists and dreamers. We'd found our place in this symphony of souls who understood that different doesn't mean less. It means special. It means gift. It means exactly what the world needs. Looking back on our journey, I realized God had a plan all along. When Silas made that Christmas morning call, I thought our world was ending. But sometimes what feels like rejection is actually God's way of redirecting you towards something better. Don't be like I was for so many years, waiting for others to accept and love your child unconditionally. Don't waste precious time hoping family will change when they've already shown you who they are. I spent too long making excuses for people who saw Danny as a burden instead of the blessing he truly is. This true story taught me that real family isn't about blood relations. It's about who shows up when it matters. The strangers in Nashville, New Orleans, and Chicago embraced Danny with open hearts, while his own brother wanted him hidden away. God placed these beautiful souls in our path exactly when we needed them most. If you're living a similar story, know that you're not alone. There are grandpa stories like ours happening everywhere. Fathers, mothers, grandparents, choosing love over comfort, protection over approval. These grandpa stories remind us that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes the most powerful grandpa stories are about ordinary people making extraordinary choices for their children. The greatest lesson I learned: sometimes you have to walk away from toxic relationships to find your real tribe. God doesn't call us to accept mistreatment in the name of family loyalty. He calls us to love, fiercely protect the vulnerable, and create safe spaces where everyone can flourish. Danny and I found our freedom when we stopped seeking acceptance from people who refused to give it. We discovered that the world is full of loving hearts. You just have to be brave enough to find them. Don't wait for permission to love your child fully. Don't apologize for their differences. Celebrate them, protect them, and trust that amazing plans await both of you. These true stories matter because they show us what's possible when we choose love over fear. Your true story matters too. Share it in the comments below. Has someone in your family ever surprised you with unexpected acceptance or heartbreaking rejection? Hit that subscribe button if this story touched your heart. And please share it with anyone who needs to hear they're not alone.